Hey, welcome to the Road and Morale podcast. So do you ever feel like screaming out in the office, on Zoom or outside the school gates? For the love of God, come on, really? Then if this is you and you're looking for an honest, fun and frank podcast on life and business, then sit back and listen to me, Rona Morale. I'll be bringing great people on the show to talk, share and debate their life experiences and business challenges, keeping the show unpolished, but in a fun and unique British style, with sarcasm, tenacity, or maybe a few swear words or tears. This podcast keeps it real, honest, raw, and removes the bullshit in the only way I know how, through authenticity and getting shit done. Think of it less like the Housewives of New York or Towie with the lipo and drama, and more like the house lives of the real world. I hope you'll take something away to be better informed, laugh, smile, or maybe even finally getting the confidence to shout, come on really. So enjoy. Hi Sean, welcome to the Rain and Morale podcast. How are you?
Very good. Thank you so much for having me, Rona.
Oh, you're very welcome, and you are looking absolutely glamorous today.
I'm just bored of slobbing out at home.
I feel like I should have put more of an effort in now, but
yeah, come on. You should see what I'm wearing underneath.
I've let the side down, clearly. No, listen, for anyone who's listening, I am delighted that Sean's agreed, and I was kind of hunting her down for quite a while to come onto the Rain and Morale podcast. And the reason why is about a year ago, I was on I can't remember if it was a working lunch or a live forum, and Sean, you were talking about what you were doing with Plastic Planet. And there was a couple of things that you said to me that genuinely was a kind of mic drop moment, and I kind of had them stuck up on my wall, and in some way, believe it or not, has transformed the way I'm doing business now, and a lot of in kind of the awareness and climate and action. So yeah, anyway, I won't bore you with that, but I have been following you a lot on LinkedIn, and Sian is the CEO and founder of Plastic Planet. And to say that you are having a major impact in the UK and globally is an understatement. So I'm delighted to have you. And I'd love to talk more about Plastic Planet and telling my listeners more about what you do and some of those big wins. So over to you, Sian.
Wow, thank you, Rona. What a setup. I can only disappoint from here on in.
No way.
So where do you want me to start? I mean, I'm probably the least likely eco warrior you will ever meet.
But that's what I love.
Yeah, my background is business. So, I was in advertising in my late teens, early 20s, and then I left advertising age 25 to set up my first business. And then I've been unemployable ever since. But obviously through that, my world has always been about business. It's always been about building small businesses, creating, I hope businesses that are not just about selling stuff, businesses that really are based on a lot more. They're built on soul, they're built on passion and a bit on purpose, and not in a deliberate way, just because that always felt like innately the right way to me. That was my upbringing, really. And then to suddenly find myself on this kind of environmental platform now is nobody's more surprised than me. But after doing everything that I've done through business, when I have my own personal epiphany of realizing what we do every single day, and we continue to do, what we have done to the oceans, what we've done to the air, what we've done to every part of our beautiful planet with our addiction to this incredible but toxic material, plastic. I couldn't not get involved. And I couldn't see if there was a way that I could use my entrepreneurial experience, perhaps my marketing experience, to see if we could create a different kind of organization. I always think of it, it's almost like a new kind of activist, that maybe the old kind of activist model, of which there is still a major place, attacking industry from the outside, because my belief is in the power of business to create change at scale and at speed. Then what I'm fascinated about is how can we make the vehicle of change? How can we make that business? Because we all know this is the most powerful thing that we have on the planet is business. Governments, of course, need to step up to a new level of responsibility as well. But if business changes, we can move at pace and at scale. And that's what we need to do now.
And I think that's why I resonated with you, and likewise with the chairman of ARC, because it's about using your skill sets and providing solutions and platforms to change. You know, you are chief change maker, and actually I'm less into the kind of battering down and necessarily slagging off a particular organization or business, but using that, making it commercial, making it profitable, but with purpose. And I think that's the thing, that it's not one to have a go at someone for something. Not that I'm saying that there isn't space for that, like you said, but how you're using your experience and influence to bring a sense of hope, and pressure, polite pressure to that world.
Sometimes impolite, let's be honest. I know, you know, the guys at Coca-Cola, I'm not their favorite person. The guys at European Plastics, I'm not their favorite person either. But I think everybody realizes change has to happen. And you know, the thing I'm painfully aware of, though, is how difficult it is for us to wean ourselves off this material. And it's very easy for us to think it's actually impossible. You know, plastic is used for everything. It's the soles of my trainers I'm wearing today. It's 60% of all our textiles. It's the paint on the walls. It's most of our furniture. It's our car. It's our electronics. It's everything. It's our phone. So how do we dramatically impact that and turn off the plastic tap? Because right now, much as, you know, all of your kind words I take, it gives me great strength. However, the reality is nothing's slowing down. Nothing is changing. Everything is in fact still escalating. We're forecast now to have a trebling in plastic pollution by 2040, which will of course be a trebling in plastic pollution, because there is no infrastructure to deal with it. So the thought that we could even, you know, attempt to recycle our way out of it is just bonkers. And every voluntary commitment and every government action, including the UK and the EU Plastics Pact, will only impact 7% of that trebling by 2040.
Really?
So, and none of them are on track to succeed. So clearly we're not doing nearly enough, and we're failing at that. So we need global governance. We need much, much bigger steps of action now.
And how do you feel about, you know, people will say, well, plastic has allowed us to keep food for longer and reduce food waste and things like that. You know, do you believe there is a place for plastics in society?
Somebody said to me a really interesting thing the other day, and it was twofold. The first thing was, imagine if 200 years ago, when we could have chosen different energy sources, imagine if we had said, let's use the power of the sun or wind or waves, but instead we chose fossil fuels. So if we'd taken a different path, where would we be today? And what materials would we have today? Because we would have invested so much time and energy and money into developing new materials that perhaps were things that nature could handle. And then the other thing somebody said to me, a material scientist, is that if we hadn't invented plastic when we invented plastic, we would have invented some other kind of plastic. It would have been another material that would have allowed us to turbocharge industry and production in the way that it has. And I think we're at a moment right now where, you know, we were talking earlier about consumption. And I think we're at a point of absolute, particularly in the West, of course, we can't generalize this, but in the Western world, we are at peak consumption. In the UK, we buy so much stuff, we have to outsource the storage of our stuff. We have the biggest big yellow box self-storage business in the world, which I find really extraordinary. That I bet, you know, like I've got a garage, I don't even know what's in that garage. I kind of wish that garage were burned down, because then I wouldn't have to deal with it. And maybe it's a kind of post-war baby boomer generation where we accumulate all this stuff around us.
And the loft.
Yeah, and it makes us feel secure, you know, because our parents lived through harder times. What if? Yeah, and just all of that stuff is this little cocoon, but actually this cocoon, I think, is just stifling us.
Yeah.
And there's an amazing film called, documentary called Minimalism. It's quite old now, but I remember seeing it maybe 7 years ago, seeing it with my son. who was 21 at the time. And we sat there watching this documentary, and it's about these two guys who are living the life in the city in New York. And then gradually they realize how unhappy it's making them.
Yeah.
And they get rid of everything, and then they go on the road. And long short, they end up on Oprah, and they write this book and therefore a documentary about minimalism. And there is a line in that film which has always stuck with me, which is, we will never have enough of something that we don't actually need. And it is so true that we're filling this hole, that being buy now, get it in 20 minutes now, because, next day isn't good enough anymore. This constant consumption that we're in.
Yeah.
Where does it come from? What is driving it? And the thing that has always struck me, of course, with plastic and the connection with this, because hyperconsumption is most definitely a major contributor to the climate crisis, the carbon crisis. And what is the one material that has enabled us to make things so cheaply, so easily, so lightweightly, so conveniently that we can use them once and throw them away? And that material, of course, is plastic.
Yeah.
So what I find so fascinating about the topic of plastic is, we didn't choose the sun, we chose fossil fuels. We did invent plastic so recently. The massive exponential ramp up of the use of plastic now is phenomenal. I think in the last 5 years, we've used more than we have ever used since plastic was invented. And every year it's compounding up. And here we are with this incredible material that has been the enabler of hyperconsumption that has got us into the mess that we're in. So I think all of these things, as we know, like nature, everything is so intrinsically connected. And what I've always found fascinating about your question, plastic, does it prolong the shelf life of food products, all of these things? And generally the answer is no, because number one, plastic has disconnected us from our food. And I don't know about you, but I am that guilty person that takes the salmon or the sausages out the fridge and it says, best before date. I don't even smell it in the bin. It tells me best before. It's wrapped in plastic. So your mum, my mum, wouldn't have done that. We'd have,
they'd chop off the mold and straight in
exactly.
Yeah,
so the whole thing of food wastage, let us not imagine, yes, in transport systems, but we can reinvent that. There's very little things that we can't reinvent with a material that is less toxic than plastic. But we're up against the fossil fuel industry, most powerful industry in the world, most subsidized industry in the world. Therefore, plastic is the most subsidized material in the world. Incredible leverage on our governments globally. With the pandemic, the fossil fuel industry, the minute lockdown started happening and the panic, obviously, over in the US, $200 million were quickly spent in lobbying US governments to lift all the plastic bag bans, to lift all the restrictions on what you can pump out into the rivers and the streams. And so they must have just thought Christmas came early. But the good news is that I feel, much as at the beginning of the pandemic, and obviously plastic PPE and everything that we've all read about, that's a big old iceberg coming to hit us very soon. But I feel that the pendulum swung at the beginning of the pandemic very firmly to, oh my God, we need to protect ourselves. This is about health. The only material in the world that can protect us is plastic. And the lobbyists had a field day of making sure that that was the message that got out. But that pendulum has swung back. And I feel now it's a little like, when something is taken away from you, don't know if you've ever given chocolate up for Lent or dry January, as soon as it's taken away from you, you crave it.
Yes.
And we had nature taken away from us. We had to be indoors. We were allowed an hour outside for exercise, in many countries. And I think that has made us realize how much we need nature, how we miss it, how we're not really designed to be in these little concrete boxes. We are part of nature, and we treated it as this thing that we can plunder, give back nothing but 2 billion tons of waste every year. And we are an intrinsic part of nature. We cannot exist. We cannot have a healthy economy without healthy people, and we can't have healthy people without a healthy planet. And so I feel that pendulum is swinging the other way. I see so many conversations happening now, obviously very much on the radar in the UK, because we've got the G7, we have COP26 coming up. And so there would be a very big focus on the UK. What are our new targets? Obviously, Boris has just come out and try to, match Biden. But I think we live in a very exciting time, and a lot of it is obviously going to come from a change of leadership in the US. And I think from a ground level, it's coming from people thinking, we've got to care for nature better. The pandemic has come to us for a reason, and we've got to treat nature in a different way.
And I'm a real firm believer of that. As much as I would hate for the global loss of death through COVID and the inequality of the way we're dealing with this as a global pandemic, what it's given us around that pause for breath, to step back, realize what's important as an individual, as business, and the focus that it's driven around the planet and climate. For that, I'm really grateful. And I just hope that, as you talk about the pendulum swinging, keeps going, and that if this global pandemic gets to a state where we're okay in 6-12 months time on global's vaccinations, we don't lose that. We don't forget that reminder of what COVID's brought to the table.
In our giddiness. It does me, because I think we have very short memories, and of course there's all this chat of what's the new normal and all of these expressions that we all hate, but the reality is, our world, we have to treat everything in such a different way. We're not talking about little incremental shunts on a dial here. We're not talking about, we're on the Titanic, we're heading for this Armageddon in 8.5 years. That's what our kids have to think about. I didn't have that future when I was growing up. For me, my future was bright, exciting. It was like flat screen TVs I couldn't even comprehend. I didn't even have a TV in our house. Just the idea of what was going to be ahead in our future was phenomenal. And what do our kids dream of? This sword of Damocles that is slated to come in only 8.5 years' time. And I feel that we have such a responsibility now that we need to get on the bus and we need to get going. And it's going to be difficult, and it's going to be a short-term pain, but for a long-term gain.
Exactly. And that doesn't mean that if we achieve these goals by 2030, that we can't still have the developments in technology and smart cities and things like that. Because earlier on you mentioned about we're not geared up to deal with the plastic, but do you have a sense of belief that there is tech out there that can deal with plastic? It might not deal with the virgin element, but where are you at? I mean, you'll know more than I do in terms of what tech exists now to deal with the plastic problem, or is it we've just got to stop the virgin element?
Our opinion is we need to stop. We need to slow down. We cannot treble plastic production. That's what we're forecast to do. And you will see that as there is a reduction in demand for fossil fuels for energy because of the increase in renewables, then where is all this glut of oil going to go? Where's all this natural gas, the cheap fracking gas from Texas, thanks to Mr. Trump? Where is all that going to go? INEOS are very proud of their virtual pipeline from Texas to Europe to manufacture cheaper and cheaper and cheaper plastic. And it's an interesting industry because it's almost a little bit like the fashion industry. The demand supply model is the wrong way round. So with fashion, as you will know, we supply, hopeful demand. 30% of it goes into landfill or incineration with the tag still on it, the label still on it. And probably 30% of it is sold at discount. So it's a completely fake model. So 30% of it is probably sold at the right price at the right time. And 60% of it plus is just it's going to waste in so many ways. Or counted or whatever. So the model is completely wrong. And interestingly, plastic is exactly the same. The polymer manufacturing facilities, those huge plastic cracking plants, they're not going to slow down. They pump out regardless of demand. So the fossil fuel industry will definitely be looking to how can they increase demand for plastics. And if they did at the same time say, and obviously we've also, if we're going to be making money in all of these areas, we have to be responsible for plastic, the material we pump out, sell to the brands. If they did step up to a new level of responsibility versus rhetoric, then perhaps that's a more interesting conversation. But I see no sign. I see many, many words. I see many reports, but I see no actual sign of huge recycling plants being built, being funded by brands and by the fossil fuel industry. It's just not happening.
No, exactly. And I'm interested to know a little bit more about the trebling of plastics. What's driving that? Obviously, we have population increase, but what's driving that figure?
Money. Because, as I was saying, it's an incredibly cheap material. It's very, very difficult for other materials to compete. There is no level playing field because obviously fossil fuels are still so heavily subsidized to the tune of trillions globally by us, the taxpayer, indirectly. So it's incredibly difficult for, if you are a brand director and you're looking at, okay, so I could, have a 30% recycled bottle, or I could try and pioneer a refill system. This needs investment. This is a system change. This is the future. But it's so much easier for that brand director right now to think, I'll just put a nice recyclable logo on it. And imagine that there is some recycling fairies out there that are actually going to deal with it. And the only thing that is going to make a really dramatic difference is, of course, laws, taxation, and levelling of the playing field. A proper degree of responsibility that if you, as let's say Coca-Cola, pumping out their 120 billion plastic bottles every single year, if they were responsible for that bottle's second, third, fourth, fifth, forever life, if it was theirs, they would design it differently in the first place. They would not design it to be something that is used for moments and then tossed away to contaminate the environment for centuries.
Yeah. Which we did years ago. It was glass bottles and you'd consume. And I've just recently gone back to the old milkman and we've got glass bottles coming to the door every day. But
I bet you love it, don't you? I bet
honestly, it's really
it's so tactile and cold in your hand. Yeah, I know.
So I could still remember when that was just the normal electric vehicles delivering your milk, and you're like, oh, this isn't new.
Yeah. Did we need Tesla to show us the way? No, we had the milkman in the 50s. But it's there are going to be so many new models, and I know the milkman a lot of people talk about because that's a lovely little memory of us harking back. And also, it's actually more convenient for you. You haven't had to go and schlep to the supermarket. It's delivered to your door every morning. You pop a note out, you get less or more. So it's super easy for you.
Well, it's even online now. You can hold, increase, decrease on an app.
Yeah.
It's so easy.
Yeah. So perfect.
But
so we need to look at,
it is more expensive.
Yes, exactly. But then we also have to look at, what is the right price? Because I think we have this strange thing, a little bit like fashion, why is it possible to buy a T-shirt for £1? Why is it possible to buy a little black dress?
We've created that.
$5.99?
And the big supermarket, and the big supermarkets. There's a reason why milk is so cheap, because they have completely, I've worked in retail and worked with the big off-trade and on-trade players who beat their suppliers down within an inch of their life because we demand cheap food and we demand it now. So it's all interlinked.
Yeah, completely interlinked. And much as, there are many households where there is a family of four and they're trying to exist on £60 a week. We must never forget that. And what I love about the plastic movement is how it's been embraced at a supermarket level by the affordable supermarkets. So, who was the first CEO to step up and say, I don't even know how we're going to do it, but we are going to eradicate all plastic from our packaging by 2025? Richard Walker from Iceland, who is immediately taking all the plastic bags out and replacing them with proper food caddy liners, which are properly compostable, that you can then put in your food waste bin, so they're reframing. It's not a carrier bag, it's a food caddy bin co-op. So I love that it's the affordable supermarkets. It isn't the M&S's and the Waitrose. I walk into an M&S and just think like, whoa, I've stepped back into Jurassic Park, and they didn't get the memo that, they're still freaking wrapping coconuts in plastic.
Oh, that kills me.
Yeah, it is all of these things. It's like, wow, the apples and the plastic tube. Little bits are happening every now and then. And of course, it'll be at the consumer end, at the front-facing end, rather than the supply chain end. Yeah. But I know, Iceland, when they measured their plastic footprint, they looked at secondary, tertiary, and their primary packaging, which many supermarkets don't. So that's the other thing that we need is, if we're going to be honest and look in the mirror and say, how big is the problem? We've got to use the same metrics. Because everybody's using different metrics.
Yeah, and equally, it's like putting your hand up and saying, I don't know how to deal with this. Someone come in and help me. Interesting. You mentioned earlier, obviously, that these are heavily subsidised by us as taxpayers. Imagine a what-if scenario. What if everyone globally went, nah, not doing it, and the governments went, we are not subsidising this anymore? What do you think would happen?
Well, everything would just get more expensive, which would be great. because that's what we have to do. So when we're talking about, there's a new tax that's coming in the UK and probably in the EU, which is if you use plastic packaging, then you have to have a 30% recycled content, or you pay a tax.
Yeah.
But when you look at the price, I had a conversation with somebody from DEFRA, obviously, because we're working on sachets. And sachets, the plastic laminated sachet, is ridiculously cheap. Yeah. So the bio-based alternative to that nature could actually handle, is probably going to be 3 to 5 times as expensive, of a very, very low unit cost. Let's imagine it costs, 0.001p.
Yeah.
But suddenly it costs 5 times that amount of money. So any tax that you put on has to be a very hefty tax. A 20% tax isn't going to make a difference on a plastic sachet. So that's where if we're going to use taxation, if we're going to use extended producer responsibility, then we have to use it at the right level, which does create that playing field that means that everybody compete. Because what we must realize is this is an unbelievable opportunity now. As the demand for plastic has to go down, please God, then the demand for these other materials is going to be extraordinary. And we live in a world at a plastic planet, which is about opportunity, which is about plant protein. It's about, new kinds of cellulose material, things that are so abundant in nature. It's about regenerative agriculture. It's about agri-waste. It's all of those things that you think, nobody is going to take the fleshy part of the corn to make packaging. No, but the fiber and the husk, then that has a lot of value to be able to create something else out of it. So there is tremendous opportunity, and we could, within Europe, become this incredible new hub of a bioeconomy. And that will be the future. And the quicker we get onto that path, the better. But at the moment, we're squeezing every last drop out of the status quo.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well. And what I like about, Plastic Planet is how they are focusing on celebrating those that are game changers and those that are really leading the way. I know I've got a client at the moment who is potentially looking at launching a sachet, and they never even considered the cheap alternatives. They've gone straight to one that is, apart from the lining in the middle, effectively is 100% recyclable. And they know it's 5 times more expensive, but they don't care. It's about doing the right thing and setting that benchmark. And I think we do need to put more of those people, on those pedestals. And I think that's what Plastic Planet does so well, is celebrating those.
And helping industry change, so our work, for example, with Unilever and the refillable Dove deodorant that you might have seen, that launched in the US in February. So that's a 2-year alliance with Unilever. And I think it's very important that when you get the 5th biggest polluter on the planet, creating something, it isn't this, but it looks like this. Yeah. It's beautiful, it's aspirational. What they've done is they've elevated sustainability from that forest floor, that knitted armpit, hairy sandal, and they put it up here. So we all think, whoa, I want that. And you feel it in your hand, and it's guaranteed for a lifetime and all the rest. And every month you simply replace the bit you've actually used, which is your deodorant. And you think that is a system change. And for the 5th biggest polluter on the planet to risk that with their most loved brand of Dove in their biggest market in the US, luckily, huge success, big selling really well in Target and CVS and everywhere. Right. We have to champion that, because we have to say, may others follow, and may this be the first of many, because here we're seeing a massive reduction in the use of materials. And that's what we have to think about. It isn't just plastic. It's, so when people talk about system change, it's about how do we buy less, buy better, repair more, reuse more, borrow more, share more. How do we get to that kind of model, which in many ways you can see already happening in technology? I don't need to own CDs anymore. I can just have them when I want them and give them back. Yeah. And I know IKEA, their new model is you won't own an IKEA piece of furniture in the future. You will rent it, you'll borrow it, and then when you're done with it, you get it back to them, because they're responsible for it. So hopefully you'll never see an IKEA mattress lying in the road.
And this morning, wasn't it Asda are going to start selling secondhand clothes?
Yeah.
Was it Asda? Yeah.
Yeah. So and a lot of it is tokenistic, I'll be honest with you, because they know that there's a market there, and but it's financially, it's a big investment for them. They're not going to make a lot of money selling onesie twosie bits of clothing, but it's thinking how a new model can work. This is where we need to really accelerate towards is what is the new model? How can Boots, walking into Boots right now is again Jurassic Park. Everything's in plastic. Everything is coloured plastic, from a bottle of shampoo all the way through. If you leave Boots, your bag is filled with plastic.
Yeah.
How could that look in 5 years' time? And those questions are really exciting to me. Of just
but
thinking,
actually, what I love about Iceland is that he's come in and gone, we're going to solve it in 5 years, right?
Yeah.
Not thought about how I'm going to do it. And this is the type of people I love. So if you had this at the head of Boots going, right, in 5 years' time, this is what our store's going to look like. And they all work, that is their marketing campaign, that is their activation, that's their strategy. The knock-on impact of that to the suppliers, to the consumers, the education, it can be done if there's willing.
Yeah, but what you would need as the CEO of Boots is for all your third-party brands to hold hands and say, let's jump together. And that's why it's quite interesting to me that Paul Pullman, who was obviously the ex-CEO of Unilever, and Jeff Seabright, who was sustainability director at Unilever as well, they've created this organization called Imagine, based in New York. And they're doing exactly that. Their model is, we can't wait for governments. We can't wait for the UN to do all the treaties that they need to do. Everything's happening way too slowly. Business is the model. This is the accelerator of everything. So they are creating these communities of those CEOs in different markets to say, okay, fashion needs to change, let's hold hands and jump together. Personal care needs to change. We need to get to a refill model. How can we do it together so that we have less risk? Because otherwise, if P&G do something and Unilever don't do it, then P&G take the hit. And the shareholders obviously are not going to be happy. That's the other thing is, of course, right now, our entire business model is still about rewarding shareholder value. It's still based on and that drives the Friedman principle.
Yeah, and that's driving the whole consume more and kind of sell more, because then it means
never-ending growth. Yeah, never-ending growth, which is why I get very excited about things like the donut economic model that I'm sure you've seen with Kate Rayworth, because I post stuff about it all the time anyway. Because I just think that whole system of people thriving, with nature thriving, with society thriving, versus this never-ending goal of GDP on an upward curve in a planet where we're already taking 2 planets worth of resources every single year. So we are literally taking the future from our children. We're selling it today and we're calling it GDP.
Yeah.
And to think about this new donut model where you don't step over the boundaries, I think is completely rethinking our inadequate economic guidelines. Yeah. And I love that. I love Kate Rayworth for that. And then when you see coming through the pandemic, you've now got cities and countries, Ireland, Chile, Amsterdam, Copenhagen, all saying we're going to rebuild our economies post-COVID based on the donut economic model. That gives you a lot of hope, doesn't it?
So exciting. No, exactly. And I watched something the other night. It was the guy who's it's on BBC One doing the climate change, and he was in Nepal, and it was an interview with their president, and he said, we measure, instead of GDP, he measures gross happiness. And that's all they do. And, people could argue, well, there's not many people, it's in the middle of nowhere and blah, blah, but it doesn't matter. That could still be applied anywhere around, and that donut model, the fact that he puts that at the heart of everything he does in his country is just hugely exciting. And they just happen to be an amazingly green country.
Yes.
It's kind of,
and there is no reason why we can't all be amazing green countries. Yes, we have a real saturation of population in the UK, but if you pull back, and I was talking to somebody yesterday, and we were talking about when you look at a light pollution map now, and what's quite extraordinary is you see this, the saturations around the cities because we're all becoming so urbanized, but the amount of land that has no light, that is not populated right now, we're not short on land. So if we wanted to, we could spread out, and we could all live a different life if we wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, Sian, I could put the wheels to rights with you for an hour and a day, but I know your time is super precious. So listen, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your passions and the plastic planet. And I do hope in the future we can kind of revisit this and see how, you know, where we're at. And yeah, I've got a big hope and ambition for 2030. So yeah, I'll continue to follow you. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your story. It's been brilliant.
Oh, thank you so much, Rhoda. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you. So that's it. You've made it. The show's over. Thank you for being with us. I hope you've been able to take something away, maybe solve a problem, or just know you're not alone. Here's hoping it made you smile with a few laughs along the way. Please feel free to find me on all social media channels, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just search the Rhoda Morrell Podcast. Have an awesome day and see you next time.